Hey there, thanks for tuning into Bricks. I'm Chris, and I just got in the brand new LEGO Jurassic World wave based off of the new movie coming in this summer, featuring finally a LEGO Mosasaurus, as well as also finally a LEGO Spinosaurus, all rendered in a brand new design and style of detail, as well as featuring a whole host of brand new minifigs, characters, dinosaurs, sets, and more. Without further ado, let's jump into a mega review of the brand new LEGO Jurassic World Summer 2025 sets. Alright, here is the entire lineup of the brand new LEGO Jurassic World Rebirth sets. All of these will release on June 1st, 2025, and thanks to LEGO for sending me them early. We're going to be taking a look at every single set in the wave, which unfortunately in the US have had their prices recently increased. However, if you're living in Europe, the prices have not been changed. We start off with 76970, Baby Dinosaur Dolores Aqualops, which retails for $28 or 25 euros. We then go to 76972, the Raptor Off-Road Escape, now retailing for $40 but 35 euros. Then is 76973, the Raptor and Titanosaurus Tracking Mission, retailing for $110 or 100 euros. 76974, the Brick-Built Mosasaurus Boat Mission for $60 or 60 euros, that one is unchanged. Same with 76975, the T-Rex River Escape, $50 and 50 euros. And then finally, 76976, the Spinosaurus and Quetzalcoatlus Air Mission, retailing for $160 or 150 euros. All of these are sporting a selection of brand new or recolored dinosaurs, the stars of the show being of course the Spinosaurus returning in LEGO form for the first time since the very early LEGO Studios Jurassic Park 3 sets, as well as the Titanosaurus making its first appearance in LEGO form as well, plus a full-on brick-built Mosasaurus, a creature that fans have been demanding LEGO release in the modern Jurassic World lineup for a very long time, although this time it's actually brick-built as opposed to a large mold, which I find to be very interesting. Now, I'll actually be going from largest to smallest when taking a look at the sets here because there's quite a lot to see, and I think the largest sets provide just the most substance for us to look at in terms of the dinosaurs and the builds themselves, and of course, much like any other Jurassic World wave, the prices of these sets, and especially for those in the US, are pretty wild because a lot of that budget goes into making the brand new dinosaur molds. In fact, I would say that the only reasonably priced sets are the ones that don't actually include molded dinosaurs. The brick-built Mosasaurus is actually priced remarkably well, and the Baby Dinosaur Dolores also has a pretty decent price for what it is. But everything else, expect to pay premium just for these large pre-molded pieces, which is fair for some sets and a lot less fair for others. To make up for that though, for whatever reason the minifigures across all the sets are remarkably detailed. Almost every single minifigure sports some kind of printing on the sides of their legs, some of them even have dual molded arms or legs, and the quality of the minifigures are really unlike any other LEGO minifigure lineup out there. It's really astonishing to me just how much effort they put into making the minifigures so perfect, especially because you could probably argue that a lot of the characters in the Jurassic World lineup don't really need that much printing. They're mostly just civilians dressed in normal human clothing. And while I'd personally prefer that some of that minifigure budget went to themes that more desperately need it, like say Marvel superheroes, I think that obviously focusing on Jurassic World, I do have to say that the minifigures are very, very well done. And so, without further ado, let's jump into my look at the largest set of the wave, 76976, the Spinosaurus and Quetzalcoatlus Air Mission. The set contains 984 pieces and once again retails for $160 or 150 euros, which is actually not that bad given the fact that it includes two brand new dinosaurs. Of course, we have seen the Quetzalcoatlus before, but in a completely different color scheme, but the Spinosaurus is all new, and it is absolutely the highlight of the set. That being said, I think that this build is one of my favorites out of all of the Jurassic World builds that maybe we've gotten even since 2015 when they relaunched the line. I just really love how it feels more like a LEGO Adventures set or something you would see out of Indiana Jones, with it being a lost temple full of traps and a waterfall to brave, as opposed to the normal just lab science buildings that we normally get as throwaway builds with the Jurassic World lineup. This is one of the only Jurassic World sets that feels like there was a lot of love put into the location and the actual focus of the set, as opposed to providing a backdrop for the dinosaurs to have center stage here. And obviously I'm not saying that the dinosaurs are not interesting, I'm just saying I'm really pleased with the build of this set, and it certainly is one of the most interesting builds we've gotten in a long time. But of course, I do want to showcase the makeup and composition of the set itself. You have these two large dinosaurs commandeering a lot of the space, you've got a 6-wheeled vehicle, this large truck here, as well as a helicopter. And I guess that it kind of makes sense. You have the large temple, you have a land vehicle to go up against the Spinosaurus, and then a helicopter to go up against the Quetzalcoatlus. But honestly, I could have done without one of the vehicles. I probably would have been happy with just a single helicopter, with the rest of the pieces being used to beef up the temple, which is by far the most interesting part of the set for me. But as a full-on playset, it does feel very complete and very balanced in the way it works. There's a lot of play features to the temple, from pulling the chain to allow these spiked weapons to drop down, to actually uncovering some secret passageways around the waterfall. There's quite a lot that you can do here with this build, and that's one of the things I really love about this particular build, is just how much it feels like a classic LEGO playset. I feel like this could have been something that LEGO would put out as, say, an adventure set, or something that is more fun and fantasy themed oriented compared to a lot of the other buildings we've gotten. And there's actually a few different ways that you can interact with the temple. Of course, you have the main entrance here with some nice brick-built detail, but on the right side, there's actually a climbing wall. Each of these 1x1 studs with bar connectors are allowing you to basically have minifigures scale the side of the cliff, which is a fun play feature to either have them climb up to the top that way, or figure out some other way into the temple. And well, there is another one. Going onto the left side here, you can see that the waterfall actually lifts open, which of course is meant to have minifigures pass through, and then you can get to the entire interior of the temple itself, or the underground portion. There's a nice print of the mosquito in amber, which is a very nice one for the Jurassic World theme. You have some pretty appropriate carvings here, one of which is actually, funnily enough, depicting a UFO abducting some sort of creature, so I don't really know if that's going to appear in the movie, but I do think that is a nice and funny decal for LEGO to include on the side of the wall here. And altogether, it just feels like a very different set than what we're used to for the Jurassic World lineup. I also love the inclusion of the dual molded LEGO City Space Crystal in dark gray and trans orange, introduced for the larger scale T-Rex skeleton, which just came out, but of course being put to good use here. At the top of the temple, there's a play feature to allow you to collapse two different parts of the temple, kind of making it look like the Quetzalcoatlus has smashed apart part of the building here. It's honestly a little too stable for what it is. The two pieces attached here are supposed to explode violently and break apart, just like you saw there, but more often than not, they actually stay together until they hit the ground. So maybe they could have done without one of the studs on the top there, or just attach the top part via one stud, but thankfully it is fairly sturdy for what it is. You have the entire appearance being that of a broken down temple. Vines are creeping all around the structure, there's foliage all over, there's a broken down statue, and of course the Quetzalcoatlus eggs. And I appreciate how they even attempted to detail some parts of the back of the temple with some foliage creeping up along the back, which they definitely didn't need to do, but really helped sell the effect of it being a 3D playset. But now moving on to the actual vehicles included in the set, they're not bad, but they're pretty much your standard Jurassic World fare. I think some of these are a bit nicer than some of the other vehicles we've gotten so far, mostly because they are in the larger set, which has a higher age range, allowing LEGO to just have a little bit more detail being factored in because it is aimed towards older audiences, but honestly, it is still just a fairly basic build. One thing I do appreciate though is that the wave sort of has collectibles. The entire plot of the movie, as far as I can tell, is retrieving dinosaur blood in order to create some vaccines, and they actually allow you to collect different colored vaccines throughout many of the sets. Almost every single set contains the identical stickered crate, which, I mean, if you're including it in every single set, I kind of feel like that should have just been a print, but essentially it allows you to store 3 different syringes inside the actual climate-controlled case here, and it's actually really well done as a collectible. You collect different colors of syringes throughout all the sets, and it's not something really advertised, but a nice surprise for me when I was building all the sets at once and realizing that we basically had a mini stealth wave of collectibles across all of these sets. The helicopter, on the other hand, is very, very basic. I think the most interesting thing to me is the usage of some of these studs on the side techniques for the curvature on the sides, and of course the LEGO Friends cupcake element as some back vents or exhausts on the back of the helicopter there. I think that's a pretty nice touch, but otherwise otherwise, it is a fairly standard build. There's nothing super crazy going on. It basically just fits one character, and one thing you will notice is the addition of stickers to allow all of these sets to feel like they're part of the same wave, tracking a specific dinosaur on the vehicle. So every vehicle corresponds to a different dinosaur. And those stickered panels actually make up a sub-series of collectibles of their own, with all the minifigures having these special computer panels which depict one of the dinosaurs as seen in the sets, which you can see Dr. Zora Bennett here holding one of those panels. As far as the minifigures themselves, all of the characters from the movie are depicted with different outfits throughout the sets. There are some repeats, but they did do a pretty good job at trying to depict different variations of the characters. You have Zora Bennett here, who seems to be one of the main characters of the movie, utilizing just the standard Black Widow headpiece, which makes sense because it is played by the same actress, and then the torso and legs are very reminiscent of something you would see out of like Dino Attack or the older LEGO Dino lines. The next character here honestly is not that accurate, at least from what we've seen from the trailers. This is Martin Krebs, the pharmaceutical representative, and looking at his appearance in the trailers, honestly, the Han Solo head and hair doesn't really match the character that well, and I honestly just can't look at this figure and not see Han Solo, given that they're literally using the exact same headpiece created for that character. But the next character, Dr. Henry Loomis, is actually a really close one-to-one match of the actor, and you can really tell which characters LEGO decided to spend their effort on trying to depict as accurately as possible. This is probably one of the most accurate minifigures going from screen to physical figure we've gotten in all of these Jurassic World sets. I love the facial expression, it just fits the actor really well, and the outfit is quite accurate to what we've seen in the trailers as well. His accessories include a backpack which goes around the neck, as well as a camera and binoculars, but again, that headpiece is just really well done, easily my favorite part of the minifigure because it just looks so much like the actor. And finally, we have just one last minifigure character, that is Duncan Kincaid. This one also has a brand new headpiece created for the character, which just works really well. Of course, you can use that on Blade minifigure mocks or customs if that movie ever does come out, because they are of course both played by Mahershala Ali, and you can really see that there's a lot of detail factored into even just a relatively simple character design. With a black t-shirt, a green belt, I really like the way the pockets are done on the front, and you have a brand new recolor of the revolver piece in this bright orange color introduced last year, meant to depict some sort of a flare gun, I presume, which is a really nice recolor and one that works very well for that accessory. Of course, the stars of the show are not the minifigures of the entire Jurassic World lineup, but the dinosaurs. The first one we're going to take a look at here is the Quetzalcoatlus, and this is identical to the previous mold that we got for the last Jurassic World movie years back, but this time they have decided to recolor it in sand blue. I actually prefer this color scheme as opposed to the original plain white. It just feels a bit more interesting as a color set, and it is really cool to get those classic Knights Kingdom 2 click hinges in sand blue again, since it's been many years since we've actually gotten them in those colors, and that was actually the color they were introduced in back for Knights Kingdom, so that's pretty cool. I always feel like this is one of the dinosaurs I've mixed feelings on, because while it is really fun to flap the wings and pose them around and open and close the bill, I really wish there was some way to articulate the head, and that is just one thing I feel like is missing from this particular dinosaur. But setting that aside, because it is a creature we've seen before, it's time to take a look at the Spinosaurus. Now, the Spinosaurus is utilizing some familiar molds, which we've seen from some other creatures like the hands and the legs, but the actual body of the torso is brand new. They've basically taken the standard LEGO T-Rex torso and just added a spine to the very top, and it is very striking in the way it was done. I kinda wish that the spine was maybe some sort of a separate piece that you could attach on via studs, but maybe even 4 studs would not have been enough to attach it, so I understand why they made it a separate mold. The tail is also really interestingly done. It's a lot more dynamic than most of the tails we've seen from dinosaurs of this size before. It has a really nice curve to it, and the entire end is fully rubber, which is quite interesting. Of course, you can open and close the jaw like so with a satisfying click, and altogether, this is easily the highlight dinosaur of the wave. It doesn't look like we're getting that monster genetic hybrid dinosaur we've seen in the trailers, so as it is right now, this is kind of like the quote-unquote main dinosaur from this particular wave of sets. Although I do have to imagine that LEGO might want to revisit this lineup at some point to give us that big bad dinosaur that we've seen teased in the trailers, because that really does seem to be the main focus of the movie. Of course, These are two really solid dinosaurs, and it's awesome to get both of these in one set. For $160, I will say that we're off to a pretty decent start. 984 pieces might not seem like that many parts for that much money, but given the fact that this includes two large dinosaurs in the same set, and some pretty good minifigs as well, this one is honestly priced not so bad. But just you wait until we get to some of the other sets, because I have a lot of thoughts on the rest of the wave. But now, let's move on to the next largest set. This is 76973, the Raptor and Titanosaurus tracking mission. It will retail for $110 or 100 euros, but unfortunately only comes with 582 pieces. The Titanosaurus is the main focus of the set, but it does include two dinosaurs, including the little raptor as well, and the interesting thing is that LEGO seems to be changing the way they do raptors, instead depicting them at a much smaller size compared to the previous molds. The Titanosaurus is utilizing some repeat molds from the Brachiosaurus, like the neck and the torso, but the tail and the head are brand new, the tail having this nice whip-like attachment and the head just being a brand new mold to actually showcase that large skull that they have on the top of their head. Now the build itself is actually another pretty interesting build. I will say the builds are certainly much more interesting than I'm used to for Jurassic World, with most of the buildings we've gotten in the past being lab buildings, but instead this time we get a large tree, a campsite, and an overgrown gas station, which kind of feels like it could fit very well in some sort of a post-apocalyptic setting. You've got the sign sort of broken apart, you have all sorts of foliage creeping into the building, the wall and rockwork is all cracked, and for the limited pieces used in making that building, I will say it's very well done. The rest of the build is comprised of this buggy and motorcycle, and honestly, I think the vehicles are like the least interesting thing about the sets to me. I feel like the locations are just so much more interesting as builds when there's something like this. You have a drone flying overhead, you've got trees growing on top of the roof, there's actually a fueling station, but clearly it's completely just been overgrown and very worn down, and it's a really interesting aesthetic for a LEGO build, especially because we don't really get sets like this in other sorts of LEGO themes. Of course, the main focus though is on this main gas station here. And I will say, this is definitely my favorite part of the set. It's super small, but I like all the little details, how it says like open 24 hours, but of course the sign is rotated to it being closed, the glass is cracked, it says no phones, ice cream, or dinosaurs, which is a nice sticker right there, and even the sign itself is falling apart. It's also Stegosaurus themed, which makes sense because this is part of some sort of dino theme park. The drone itself is a fairly decent build, but it really adds a lot of life to the set, being mounted on the curved, transparent, clear mounting element, and the inside of the gas station is also really well done. I love the addition of the spoiled hot dog in sand green that has been left out far too long. The refrigerator is actually cracked open there. You've got some suspicious colored juice or smoothie dispensers mounted on the side of the wall, and then of course a computer with the screen being blank. I also really love the outside of the build as well. There's a snake slithering across the roof. You kind of have this canopy element being used to have a net to provide some shade with a lantern hanging from the side, and you can actually sort of drive the Jeep in a little bit. It doesn't quite fit all the way. You kind of have to get rid of the box that's blocking its path, but you can sort of drive the provided vehicle in here, just kind of going in this way, and you actually use the mechanism to fuel it up, which I think is a very nice touch. And this does have, again, one of those collectible cases holding these syringes on the back of the vehicle itself. Before we move on from the gas station, just one last thing I want to point out. Again, on the exterior, you've got all sorts of mold and mildew creeping into the side of the building. Parts of the brick are cracked and broken, and you can see some greenery peeking their way through the cracks, and it's, again, such a really interesting aesthetic. They're really doing a lot with the limited parts budget available for a building like this, and that I really do appreciate. Moving on to the other location-based build of the set though, we have a campsite here with a tent and a large tree. The tree itself is, of course, the exact height for the Titanosaurus to nibble on, and the campsite is fairly basic, but I do like some of the building techniques being used. You have one of those triangular Nexo Knights wedge elements being used on the back of the tent to allow it to kind of feel more solid and set up. You've got a cooking station available over the fire, and there even is a pretty nice mechanism to allow the tree to be collapsed. Perhaps the Titanosaurus will have knocked it over as it's walking along. And of course, I don't expect any of these to really be depicting exact one-to-one scenes from the movie, but I do think it is a pretty nice touch to just add in some play features of what dinosaurs might be doing with the terrain, where, as you can see, you have the Titanosaurs coming on up to the trees, kind of taking a nibble and taking a bite, and then you can actuate the mechanism down below to actually cause the tree to collapse, and it is just the perfect height for it to do so, which is a nice touch. It's also a very rudimentary feature, but one that actually works pretty well. You actually just spin the lever here, and the whole system goes down like so, which is a really nice touch. Altogether, it's a fun little play feature, fairly simple in the way it works. You literally just have it attached by a couple of studs, and then you push the lever and the tree falls over. So super basic, but just a standard play feature that you would want to see in a set like this. Moving on from that though, we can take a look at the attached buggy, the ATV, and the little sidecar included in the set as well. The vehicles themselves are honestly not the most interesting. I would actually say they're probably some of the least interesting vehicles in this entire wave lineup. There are a couple of interesting things they've done, or at least ways to make them feel more than just a basic build, such as the usage of tan ingots with studs on the side building techniques for the front ATV, or just a little bit of color blocking on the back of the kind of back cabbie that they're attached there. But by and large, they definitely are very, very basic. One thing I do want to call out is that the Jurassic Park logo is printed on the front of that 2x2 slope, which is very nice. It is always good to get a printed accessory, especially one that can be reused in a lot of places like that, but altogether, the rest of the build is pretty unremarkable. You can raise the canopy to release the minifigures, and of course you have spaces to mount the weapons on the side, but other than that, it is very, very basic. The vaccine carrier is again identical to the other sets, using that same sticker design. This one though comes with 3 different colors of the syringes, which is actually pretty nice, given that it's actually pretty rare to have the syringe be included in multiple different colors in the same set. Usually they just stick to one of the color schemes it's typically included in, but these collectible sets actually have quite a few different colors for you to collect, which is quite nice. Of course, the minifigs included are unfortunately just very identical to the largest set, Martin Krebs, Zora Bennett, and Dr. Henry Loomis, providing really no sort of distinction between buying the largest set and this one, other than you get a few extra characters in the larger one. But again, the minifigures aren't really the focus here. The focus is on the dinosaurs, and well, it's in the name. Let's take a look at the Titanosaurus. This is a really nicely done creature. It is pretty much just using like 4 individual pieces, but they're done very nicely. They've actually managed to print the underside of the Brachiosaurus neck piece, which is quite nice, and the head itself is very, very nicely molded. You have the growth on top of the skull, you have the option to move it all the way around, open and close the mouth, as well as a fin molded into the top of the head, and it's a really nice evolution on the standard build that we saw previously for the Brachiosaurus, while still making use of the existing mold sets. Also, the new tail included is quite nice. I really like how they were able to capture that whip-like appearance that we've seen in the trailers with just a much longer tail than what we're used to for some of these standard dinosaurs, and a much longer rubber tip as well, which really allows you to bend and flex it every which way, and even actually have some printing on the end of the tail, which just adds more to the detail of this creature. The only thing I will say that I wish was improved about the Brachiosaurus and Titanosaurus type of dinosaur was that there is no way to move the 4 legs, and I feel like that is a major missed opportunity. Personally, I would have loved to have the ability to articulate the legs. I guess LEGO decided not to do it to just make it easier to pose, but that does feel like a missed opportunity to me, especially given how the older dinosaurs back in the early 2000s did have that option. Here we also have a raptor included in the set, and it is a smaller version of raptor as opposed to the standard raptors we're typically used to seeing even as recently as the latest Jurassic World movie. I guess LEGO is trying to make the scales of the dinosaurs make more sense in relation to the minifigure, which is why they're scaling down the raptor, but unfortunately, with it being scaled down, a lot of the articulation is gone as well. It basically is just 2 individual pieces. The legs, arms, and torso are all attached on one piece, and then you can open and close the jaw, so I do miss the amount of articulation we used to get with the old raptors, but the dinosaurs are still quite nice. Overall, this is where the price is starting to really hurt on these sets. $110 for only 582 pieces is not fantastic. Granted, At least several of those pieces go into the extremely large molded Titanosaurus body parts. So I do understand, even if you were to price that dinosaur at like $20 tops, maybe $25 or $30, and I know it's going to be a lot more in the aftermarket, but just value in a set, I still don't think the set by itself is worth that much. It's a nice side build, but it's a $20 or $35, maybe $40 side build at tops, so combining the two just doesn't really get me to $110, and I definitely wouldn't necessarily recommend this set unless it goes on discount. But again, it is Jurassic World after all, so you are paying for a premium to get the dinosaurs. But now, let's actually move on to one of the more nicer price sets of the wave, and that's the brick-built Mosasaurus, which is a really nice change of pace compared to what we're normally used to seeing from this lineup. The answer to this set's affordability is in the name. Instead of actually including any molded dinosaurs, they decided to instead depict the Mosasaurus in a fully brick-built form. And this is honestly a pretty controversial choice. A lot of people were really hoping for something like the molded Mosasaurus that we saw in the Jurassic World LEGO video game. But honestly, I am very happy that they decided to go the brick build method for this, because it is a lot more posable than a giant molded one would be. It certainly costs a lot less, and it actually feels like you're getting a pretty decent deal with this set. It retails for $60 US, but comes with 858 pieces, making it one of the only Jurassic World sets that actually is fairly priced. I really do feel like I'm getting my money's worth here. Even though of course I was provided this set for free, I definitely can happily recommend it, as opposed to some of the other ones where I definitely recommend waiting for a discount. I want to focus in on the Mosasaurus because it is, of course, the star of the show. The last time we got a Mosasaurus was back in the LEGO Dinosaurs line in the early 2000s, and a lot has changed since then. It's very interesting to get this as a fully brick-built creature that actually looks really good. In fact, there are basically no specialized pieces being used in the model at all. Unless you count the printed eyes, it basically is just utilizing standard LEGO pieces. I honestly thought that when they first were rumoring this set, that we would see something similar to the Payakan the Tulkun set from Avatar, which had a very large set of molds for the front jaw, but of course had the rest of the body being brick-built, but instead LEGO went all the way. It feels a bit more like one of those Stellar Creator 3-in-1 animals than a actual standard LEGO Jurassic World dinosaur in a good way. I love just how posable it is. You can swing the body back and forth, making it look like it's actually swimming in the water. There's enough friction in each of the individual joints so that it doesn't flop all over the place. You can have it fixed with a pose, but if you swing it hard enough, you can actually have those joints bend and flex like you're seeing here. It just is so satisfying to hear those click into place and really mimic the creature swimming through the water. The color scheme is a bit of an interesting choice. You have olive green and dark brown, which honestly is maybe the closest they could have gotten to depicting the creature. I've seen people do it in sand blue or dark blue, but honestly I feel like that is more of a reflection of the water that it's in versus the creature itself, and I think that the striped color scheme here actually did work very well to its favor. It does include a number of printed elements on the top of the spine here, where you have the brown and dark orange coloration being printed in, which is a very nice touch. Just really makes it feel a bit more premium when you're actually putting the model together, and I like how they included so many of those pieces that it really just feels justified in the price. Overall, I was skeptical when I first saw images and was part of the group that really wanted a large molded Mosasaurus, but after getting a chance to play with it in hand, I am liking it a lot more, and I'm totally sold on the brick build concept. Of course, to accompany the Mosasaurus, you have a number of additional side builds that add limited amounts of play to the set. You have a couple of rocks here, and the intent is to actually have the boat crash on top of one of the rocks, giving it a pretty dynamic display similar to the hidden side boat that we got. That was a really stellar set, but honestly, the rocks are not that interesting. They're trying to do something that's a little bit strange, where it has an underwater section with a fish swimming, and then you have some underwater foliage, but then of course you have the top of the rocks poking above the water. But they all just look like they're above the water anyways with the dark blue base or the light blue azure base, so I'm not really convinced by that method there. And the boat itself is very basic. It's one of the more basic builds included in the entire lineup. Again, much like most of the other sets, you do have that syringe collectible, which again begs the question, why didn't they just print the top of this if you're going to include the same sticker in like 5 different sets? One of which is a transparent backed one, as you'll see in one of the other sets, so it actually is a worse print than some of the others. $50, but it is what it is. Overall, the boat itself is well done. I do like the fact that it has a more unique color scheme than most. You've got a red, white, and dark gray color scheme, and some of that is reflected in these stickers too. And once again, you've got one of those green radar or sonar panels depicting the dinosaur on screen, which is another nice way to bridge all of the continuity of the sets into each other. I always like it when little decals across different LEGO sets reference other sets, and this is actually a really nice way of doing it to make it feel like you're actually collecting something fully unique. Now, the two minifigs included in the set are actually unique compared to what we've seen before. You've got Atwater and Leclerc, and these two are unique figures. Atwater has some really nice printing on the side of the legs, which is bound to just be very useful in a lot of different scenarios. I can see a lot of minifigures just utilizing that kind of cargo shorts pattern, which is something that just works very, very well for the character. No alternate face, but I think the design of the figure is good enough for what it is. And then Leclerc here is a little bit more simplistic in the color scheme and printing compared to the other figure. The legs are just plain and the torso is pretty basic, but I do like the plaid detailing and the fact that he does have an exclusive torso. The headpiece, I believe we have seen before. It is one of the generic headpieces, but honestly, for the minifigures, I think they're fine. And again, the minifigs are never really the focus of a Jurassic World lineup. Even just getting minifigures with a little bit more interesting print sets is certainly just the cherry on the top. But with that, we can move on to the T-Rex River Escape. Now this is a little unfortunate, because this set retails for $50 US, that's right, 50, but it contains only 199 pieces, which is absolutely baffling to me. The T-Rex is sure a very iconic part of the Jurassic franchise, and just an iconic dinosaur in general, some would argue the most iconic, but it is a dinosaur we have seen the most times before. I cannot count the number of T-Rexes that I have seen in LEGO with this exact mold set before. So to charge $50 for a very, very small side build and just a T-Rex is bizarre to me. I guess that maybe I can see it working because it's really the only LEGO set with a T-Rex out now on store shelves, but it is kind of ridiculous just how expensive this is, even compared to some other previously crazy priced T-Rex sets. This one really takes the cake. Now the side build is decent enough. There's a couple of fun things you can do. You can actually, as you just saw me demonstrate, have the T-Rex literally smash through the walls, which I guess means that it's built to fall apart, but it is a pretty decent feature for that. And then pushing a lever on the back of the set actually allows you to launch the boat forwards, which is a nice little touch, just giving you a bit of a getaway from the T-Rex itself. And you might notice that maybe some of that extra budget went into printing the sides of the legs of both of the characters here, which maybe was an unnecessary expense. I really don't fully understand why the budget works the way it does, but $50 for this is just kind of crazy. Of course, I do want to focus in on the T-Rex because thankfully it is at least a brand new color scheme compared to what we've seen before. It kind of has this dark tan and gray color scheme, which actually works very well. I don't know if this T-Rex is supposed to be one of the ones we've seen in the franchise before, but I think it works well for being a more realistic color scheme, especially compared to some of the wackier color schemes we've gotten so far. The only downside is that unfortunately, because the lower jaw is tan, the teeth are also tan, which means they did skimp out on printing the teeth for the lower jaw, which again is not that big of a deal, but for $50, I would have loved for this to be like the most detailed T-Rex we've gotten. And as it is right now, it's just okay. It's honestly just kind of generic compared to a lot of the other more fanciful or more unique T-Rexes we've gotten. It fits the realistic style, but it doesn't really do anything special compared to the other versions of the same dinosaur we've gotten. Aside from the T-Rex, the set does include two minifigures, Xavier Dobbs and Teresa Delgado, who are both pretty unique and brand new for this set, and the one thing I will appreciate is the fact that they actually managed to again print these sides of the legs. They gave them brand new facial expressions like the one you can see here, and the only thing I can say is that the print quality on the torso is not the best. You can tell the skin tone printed doesn't really match the headpiece, and that's because it's printed on the black color, which is just a darker color for LEGO to print on. It's not really an excuse because LEGO has demonstrated in the past that they can totally print light colors on dark plastic just fine, and it's not the most egregious example, but just something I did want to call out. The other figure, Teresa here, has a brand new torso element, which is really nice. You've got a new print for the torso, new prints for the legs as well, showcasing that printing on the sides of the legs, which again, I don't really know if we needed it. If we could have removed the side leg printing and taken $10 off the set, I certainly would have been a lot happier, but I can never really complain that much about side leg printing. Overall, this is one of the sets that just feels like the most overpriced one out of this wave, even compared to some of the other ones. Sure, some of the other ones are larger and more expensive, but $50 for 199 pieces, maybe if the dinosaur was brand new, like if they threw the Spinosaurus in this set, I could probably understand it, but given that it is one of the dinosaurs we've literally seen 1,000 times before, with only a very different style of printing compared to what we've seen in the past, it just doesn't really do it for me. But now we can move on to the second to last set here, which is also the smallest minifig base set, the Raptor Off-Road Escape. So this set retails for $40 and comes with 285 pieces. Again, the value is not great there. But setting the price aside, I actually really like both of the builds included in this set. It definitely is one of the most interesting vehicles to me, which makes sense given that the set is basically just focused on the off-road vehicle. The Raptor, however, has a pretty fun play feature too, and we'll take a look at that in a second. First off, let's start with the vehicle. This is just kind of your traditional Jurassic World or Jurassic Park Jeep. It's a little different from the ones we've seen in the past, but I actually like it for what it is. You've got some nice studs in the side detail. The color scheme is actually very solid here. I like the black and the red, calling back to that original Jurassic Park logo, and a little bit of light tan as well. Everything about the color scheme just works very well. And you've got some really great equipment on the back there. You've got like a satellite or radar dish. You have some pretty nice detail with the roll cage elements being mounted on clips on the back and top of the vehicle, and this just feels like the most put together and well finished vehicle that we've seen from the lineup so far, even compared to some of the larger sets. And again, it's probably because this is one of the focus points of the set itself. Now, we actually do get two different dinosaurs included in this set. Of course, the set is named off of the Raptor, but this one actually does come with the small version of the baby Aqualops, which we're about to see as a full-on brick-built character in baby Dolores Aqualops in a little bit. The new mold introduced for this baby dinosaur is absolutely adorable. I love the printing, I love everything about it. It's always very, very nice to get brand new dinosaur molds, so I really do like it for what it is. Going back to the truck though, there's honestly not much else I have to say about it. For once, this one doesn't actually have the same exact collectible that we've seen in the other sets, which is the syringe collecting, but it does come with a syringe. Maybe you can use this to transport it back to some of the larger crates, and I actually kind of like this accessory a bit more. You've got that radar dish, which just feels a bit more unique compared to what we're used to. But now let's take a look at the small side build of the foliage meant for the Raptor, because that is actually a pretty fun play feature in and of itself. The way this works is it's very simple. There's a gear base which allows you to rotate the gears based on studs interfacing in between the gears. You push on the back of the mechanism and the leaves will roll away and reveal the Raptor. Now, this Raptor is basically identical to the other Raptor included in the exact same wave, which is a bit disappointing because at the very least I would have loved to see a different color scheme for the Raptor, but no, instead this is identical to the one we're getting in the $110 Raptor and Titanosaurus tracking mission set, which is a little disappointing. I certainly miss the days when LEGO would just give us brand new recolors of dinosaurs willy-nilly, but I will say the play feature is actually really fun. It's very, very simple. It reminds me of some of my favorite older small-scale Ninjago playset features, and it's just something that works very, very reliably and well. Going into the minifigures of the set, you have another copy of Isabella Delgado, but you also have a brand new minifigure Ruben Delgado included in this set as well. He does come equipped with that orange flare gun, which is a nice touch, and Isabella does have a really nice print with a swirl on it to represent maybe a fossil or some sort of seashell that she's collected during her visit to the island, which is a nice little touch and a cool printed accessory for the character to have. Removing the backpack on Isabella belays a very, very simplistic torso, just a couple of different curves here and there, but I actually do like the hairpiece being used. It's a relatively uncommon hairpiece, and it seems to match the character fairly well from the little that we've seen from the character in the trailers. Overall, $40 for this is too much. I think that this should be $30 tops, especially for 285 pieces, and the Raptor, which is a unique dinosaur, but it is a pretty small one, and one that we do see in the other sets. 40 is too much, maybe 35 at a stretch, but honestly, this is another one of the ones that feels a little overpriced for what you get. But that's just my opinion. But now we can move on to the final set of the wave, Baby Dinosaur Dolores Aqualops. This set continues the lineup of baby dinosaurs that we've seen over the past few years, and I think it is just alright. It's very cute for what it's supposed to represent, and I'm sure the target demographic is really gonna love it, but personally I really like the Jurassic World sets that focus on the actual molded dinosaurs, and this one being just a brick-built one that is out of scale with minifigures is just not my personal cup of tea. But I will have to admit it is a nice and fun build, and at the very least it's a really solid parts pack. There's a lot of really nice, more modern elements included here, like the Optimus Prime wedge plate in dark tan. You have the lower jaw there, which is utilizing one of the newest elements, I believe introduced in 2025 to kind of add to the family of LEGO curves. You've got all sorts of really nice, relatively modern slope and curved elements being used all throughout the dinosaur, and that's just something I really appreciate. My favorite part though is the inclusion of the brand new LEGO Friends gummy/cover light piece. It's very similar to the vintage LEGO Coverlight element in the fact that it is just kind of a rounded piece with a stud attachment, but it works really well. And it's very nice to get it in a more neutral color like black here. The other versions of the piece that we've gotten in the LEGO Friends sets have been more fantastical colors like trans green or trans orange, but black is a very neutral color to get for it, and I love just how many of the piece we get as well. 3 on each of the legs to make up the toes, which just adds so much fun to the set itself. Overall, it's very poseable, it includes some extra foliage for the baby to munch on. Maybe it would have been nice to actually splay the back legs out because they're pretty much just fixed in a vertical position the way it is, but honestly, for a set this small, I can't complain that much. And it does come with 339 pieces, so $28 for this is actually not that bad, although I do miss the original price of $25, which is really what it should be. But now let's take a step back and take a look at the wave as a whole. Honestly, I'm pretty happy with the composition of the builds. I definitely feel like the builds themselves are more interesting than most other Jurassic World sets we get, but the prices are all over the place for this wave. The largest set is okay, it's not amazing. $160 for a brand new dinosaur, a new recolor of a super big dinosaur with both the Spinosaurus and Quetzalcoatlus is somewhat understandable. I think $150 would have been a lot better. I think $120 would have been perfect, but I understand that price. The T-Rex River Escape being $50, I cannot understand. That's like a 25-cent price per part ratio, which doesn't mean everything. Again, a lot of those parts are big and large, but it is remarkably expensive for what it is. Same goes for the Raptor and Titanosaurus tracking mission. $110 for 582 pieces, and a dinosaur made primarily out of molds we've seen before is not the best, and I really wish the prices were a little better. Every time LEGO releases a brand new wave of Jurassic World, I always have to brace myself for some outrageous prices, but I will say they do feel a bit worse than usual even for Jurassic World and especially for this wave. The only sets that are fairly priced are maybe the brick-built Mosasaurus. That one actually does make sense for what you get. They could have even charged $80 for it, but let's not give LEGO any ideas. Retailing at the $60 or $70 US point is not bad at all. But everything else just being very expensive for what they are just definitely makes me worry that LEGO Jurassic World might not sell as well as it could be because it is just so expensive compared to a lot of the other LEGO themes out there. But that about sums up my honest opinions on these sets. I do like them for what they are. The dinosaurs are good. It's good to see a mix of reuses as well as brand new dinosaurs, and I'm curious to see if LEGO will ever revisit these movies again, because they have sort of been revisiting some of the older movies in recent history, so maybe in a year where there isn't a new Jurassic World movie, I could see them going back and giving us some dinosaurs from the movie that we didn't get. But that's all I have to say. Thank you so much for tuning into Duck Breaks, and let me know in the comments, are you planning to pick any of these up when they launch on June 1st? Which dinosaurs are your favorites, or which sets do you maybe want to pass on? That's all. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe for even more LEGO news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming your way very soon. Bye for now.